At the exact moment of free-falling from the balcony to the ground, the girl's memories of her past life suddenly came rushing back. She was shocked to realize that she had transmigrated into a novel, where a young girl was the precious darling of a villainous ducal family. Cruelly, Vivi was the beloved female protagonist, adored by everyone, while she was merely a villainous supporting character, destined for a miserable end. In this world, the imperial family was nothing but an empty shell. To suppress the absolute power of the Castline family, the emperor pressured Raymond into an engagement with Titania. This political match was a thorn in the side of the ducal house, and they were merely waiting for the right moment to call it off. As for Titania, her life had always been a tragedy. Her mother was forced into a political marriage with the imperial family, while her true lover was murdered by her own family. The trauma caused her to give birth to Titania prematurely, after which she fell chronically ill and confined herself to her palace. The emperor quickly grew tired of her, bestowing his favor upon the first imperial consort instead. Growing up neglected and starved of affection, Titania's longing for attention became twisted. She clung to Raymond like a lifeline, throwing tantrums, destroying property, and insulting his family, just to keep him from speaking to any other young lady. Waking up in a hospital bed after her fall, Titania clutched her head, tearing at her hair and cursing herself. "Oh my god, you absolute idiot. What on earth have you been doing all this time?" A cold shiver ran down her spine as she recalled her fate in the novel. In a few years, the first imperial consort would exploit her insecurities by spreading rumors that the emperor was planning to call off the engagement, so the female lead, Vivi, could marry the first prince. Blinded by jealousy, Titania would attempt to poison Vivi in an incredibly clumsy manner. Naturally, she would fail. "I love you, I really do. Why are you looking at me as if I'm some sort of insect?" But in response to her despair, Raymond would only coldly brush her hand away, saying, "I'm glad you finally understand exactly what you are to me." The fate awaiting her was to be sent to the guillotine by Raymond's own hands. As she spiraled into panic, her maids rushed into the room in a flurry, pulling her upright. "Your Highness, please get up. This is no time to be lying down. Young Duke Castline is on his way to visit you." Titania froze. What on earth? Why now? No, she absolutely refused to let herself meet such a miserable end. How could a neglected princess possibly fight against the female lead's plot armor? This was her second life, one she had managed to obtain against all odds. Her escape plan officially commenced. First, she had to quickly annul the engagement with a family that despised her. After that, she would take her money and run. Her ultimate goal, a 3-story building in a bustling commercial district, 50 million gold coins in cash, a minor but secure noble title, and a perfect escape route out of the imperial palace. Titania smirked, her eyes gleaming with determination. "Just you wait. I will live a brilliant and free new life, and make you all watch." In her bedchamber, the maids were frantically urging Titania to prepare for the young duke's arrival. Acting in tandem, they put on a show of deep concern for her injuries. At that moment, the head maid, Natalie, stepped forward and said solicitously, "Princess, if you wish, I can dispatch someone to the second imperial consort to request a priest to heal you." Titania swept a cold gaze over her. Look at them putting on a play. Throughout the 3 days, she had lain unconscious. Not a single person had uttered the word priest. Now that Raymond was on his way, they were suddenly pulling this stunt, clearly terrified that the Castline family would discover how neglected the princess truly was by the imperial court. Almost all the servants in the Rose Palace were spies for other factions, and Natalie was a plant of the first imperial consort. Titania knew all too well that if she listened to Natalie and begged her biological mother, she would undoubtedly be rejected. Once her heart was broken again, the first imperial consort would swoop in as a compassionate savior to manipulate her. The naive, foolish Titania of the past would have fallen straight into the trap, but things were different now. Titania turned to her maids and declared nonchalantly, "Raymond heads to the front lines every winter. He has surely seen plenty of injured people. I don't need a priest, nor do I need Manga. I shall meet him just as I am." The maids broke into a cold sweat upon hearing this, frantically trying to dissuade her. They were terrified that Raymond would grow even more disgusted with her in this state. But Titania could not care less. She tilted her chin up smugly. "Let him. If he detests and rejects me, all the better." Meanwhile, Raymond's secretary whispered sarcastically, suspecting that her fall from the second floor was merely a self-harm stunt designed to gain his attention. Raymond remained silent. His fiancée's lies and dramatic tantrums were far too familiar to him. The door swung open and young Duke Raymond stepped in, his expression ice cold. As he looked at Titania, a fleeting memory crossed his mind. When they first met at 5 years old, the young Titania had been truly beautiful. If only she had remained that sweet. Perhaps he would not have grown to detest her so much. Instead, she had become unreasonable, constantly weeping and demanding. "Why don't you like me the most, Raymond?" The burdens of a future heir were far too heavy. His father was aging and frail, and his younger siblings were still young. He had to shoulder the weight of his entire clan, defend the northern front lines, and guard a bloodline secret that could never be exposed. He'd had neither the luxury nor the time to prioritize Titania. Coming here today, he had braced himself to hear her complaints, expecting her to use her injuries to act spoiled and cling to him as she always did. Yet, events veered completely off course. Seated opposite him at the tea table was not a love-crazed princess. Titania calmly lifted her teacup and took a sip. There were no tears, no reproaches about his late arrival, and not a single shred of embarrassment regarding her disheveled appearance. Raymond was stunned. The eyes that had once gazed at him with a haunting mix of longing and desperation were now entirely vacant. Not a single trace of emotion remained for him in her gaze. Titania set her teacup down and spoke with absolute clarity. "The reason I wish to speak with you in private is simple. I would like to propose a transaction, young Duke." Looking him straight in the eye, she enunciated every word. "In my maternal family's territory, there is an abandoned iron mine. Deep within the dungeons of that mine lies the hidden crest of Gloriana." Raymond's pupils contracted sharply. The crest of Gloriana was one of the ancient relics belonging to the 4 founding heroes of the Empire. Legend dictated that the Emperor and the heroes had utilized divine power to erect the Northern Barrier. Over time, however, the imperial family's power waned, and the heroic bloodlines faded into obscurity. Only the Castline family remained to guard the weakening barrier alone. To remedy this, the Castline house had been covertly gathering these ancient armaments. This was a state secret completely hidden from the imperial court. Yet Princess Titania knew of it. Without a moment's hesitation, Raymond drew the sword at his hip, pointing its cold, sharp tip directly at Titania's throat. His eyes darkened with suffocating bloodlust. "What is your true objective, Princess Titania?" Titania smiled faintly. "My objective?" Her mind was screaming. To call off this engagement immediately, pocket 50 million gold, and secure a one-way ticket out of this godforsaken imperial palace. Naturally, she could not utter those words. Instead, she maintained her calm smile, lowering her gaze slightly. "Think of it as a secret gift. Consider it a small bribe to pique your interest in our transaction." Seeing that Raymond remained wary, Titania decided to deliver her trump card. She brought up the garnet he had recently received from Count Orland, in exchange for sharing a dance with the Count's daughter. She smiled knowingly, exposing him. "Why would someone who loathes socializing as much as you, Raymond, agree to a dance so easily for a mere gem? Unless, of course, the gem and the dance were nothing but bait to distract the public eye. In truth, only Titania. It was the wrath of Flamberge, an ancient relic possessing the power of fire. Constantly scrutinized by the Emperor, the Castline family could not openly collect these divine weapons. Thus, they used the highly publicized dance as a distraction, allowing the second young master of the family to secretly swap the swords. Had she been the Titania of the past, she would have thrown a jealous fit over that dance. But the present Titania saw right through their entire charade. Titania feigned dabbing a tear from her eye, sighing deeply. "I went to all the trouble of preparing a gift for you, yet you draw your sword on me. My heart is positively aching." Raymond froze, then slowly sheathed his weapon. He bowed his head to apologize for his rudeness, though his mind was in absolute turmoil. Who on earth is this woman? Where has her obsessive infatuation gone? Titania simply laughed it off, pretending that hitting her head against the tree under the balcony had altered her personality. She wanted nothing more than to yell, "I'm a transmigrator who literally died and came back to life." But she forced herself to swallow the words. Raymond bypassed further pleasantries and asked directly, "What do you want in exchange for this secret?" Titania's gaze turned incredibly sharp, scanning the rundown Rose Palace where she lay injured, while her servants remained completely indifferent. She demanded boldly, "I require a loyal guardian knight and a maid, people capable of taking a life and saving one." Raymond's secretary gasped in panic, convinced the princess had lost her mind, or had been replaced by an imposter. Raymond, however, knew that the imperial bloodline was protected by holy light. No dark magic could ever possess her. This was indeed the real Titania. He recalled her confident proposal of a mutually beneficial partnership, suggesting they exploit each other's weaknesses to survive. Titania flashed a bright, liberated smile, entirely devoid of affection. "Just so there is no misunderstanding, young Duke, I no longer have any interest in you. My goal is certainly not to force you into marriage. Raymond fell silent for a moment before turning to leave. I must report this to the patriarch, but the moment he turned his back, crash, clatter, the deafening sound of shattering objects shook the entire palace. Raymond whirled around in shock. Titania was frantically destroying the room, throwing and smashing everything within arm's reach. Her eyes were wide and her hair was disheveled as she screamed like a madwoman. The surrounding maids shrieked in terror, desperately trying to restrain her, yet even as she rampaged like a lunatic, a sly smirk played on her lips. Her voice echoed with absolute calm in his mind. Since I trust you, I shall warn you in advance. I plan to continue playing the madwoman in front of others, so please do not be too surprised. The entire Rose Palace erupted into chaotic screaming as Titania swept everything off the tables and hurled it to the floor. The terrified maids cowered in a corner. What do you all take me for? Why did you let Raymond mock me? She shrieked, snatching up a heavy book and throwing it straight at the forehead of the talkative maid from earlier. To any onlooker, Princess Titania appeared to have completely lost her mind, but deep down she was gloating. The sensation of striking back at those who had once trampled all over her was incredibly satisfying. These servants had never truly cared for her. They had not even bothered to investigate why a princess had fallen from a second-story balcony. In fact, incredibly heartbreaking. On that day, the second prince had caught a mild cold, and the first imperial consort immediately summoned a priest. The naive Titania had thought that, if she were to suffer a grave injury, perhaps her own mother would visit her, if only once. Not knowing how to fake an injury, she had simply stepped out onto the balcony. Standing there, peering down at the distant ground below, the original Titania must have been so utterly terrified and trembling. However, at the exact moment she was hesitating, the balcony railing suddenly collapsed. It was a ridiculous accident born from poor maintenance and the neglectful, insolent attitude of the servants. It was the sheer indifference of the palace staff that had pushed Titania to the brink of death. Back in the present, Titania glared at the trembling maids. Suddenly, one of them attempted to soothe her by flatteringly offering a cup of hot cocoa. Titania sneered. In all her life, they had never once let her taste anything sweet. For them to suddenly act this kind, that person had to be arriving soon. Knock, knock. The door opened. The first imperial consort, Cleo Dinatri Hamastion, stepped inside. She was a woman of mature beauty and gentle smiles, yet she was the very person who manipulated the emperor and held the true power within the harem. The moment she saw Titania, she rushed over, caressing her face. Oh, my sweet little princess. The moment I heard you were ill, I hurried right over. Who has made my daughter so angry? It was a chilly touch masked as tender care. Titania shuddered. She knew this woman's true colors all too well. Initially, Cleo had intended to kill her the moment she was born. However, after giving birth to the first prince, she suffered consecutive miscarriages and became barren. Thus, she changed her mind, deciding instead to turn Titania into a disposable pawn. Cleo embraced Titania tightly, whispering into her ear in an enchanting voice, "In this world, only I could ever love a child like you." This is how she brainwashed Titania, making her believe she was hideous and worthless, and that she could only survive by relying on the first imperial consort. Looking at Titania's disheveled state, Cleo offered a reassuring smile, advising that such an appearance was unseemly, that Raymond, being a young duke, would not appreciate such sloppiness. Titania submissively bowed her head, playing the role of the love-struck child to perfection. With teary eyes, she asked, "Then what should I do to make him forgive me?" Cleo smiled triumphantly, her eyes flashing with calculation. "I have recently acquired an incredibly precious sword. I originally intended to give it to Prince Brian, but seeing how sad you are, I shall let you present it to the young duke instead." The name of that sword was Vespasio. Hearing that name, Titania's pupils contracted sharply. Her entire body stiffened as a cold shiver ran down her spine. Just as there were divine relics infused with the power of light, there were naturally demonic weapons harboring the power of darkness. Vespasio was a demonic sword born from a failed attempt to fuse the powers of a demonic beast and a divine beast. Anyone who wielded it for an extended period would have their mind consumed, ultimately leading to their demise. In the original novel, Prince Brian himself had used it and met a tragic end. Yet now she wanted to use Titania's hands to present a demonic sword radiating foul energy to the ducal family, the sole protectors of the Empire's barrier of light. Titania gritted her teeth inwardly. This is no different from telling me to go die. Even if Cleo might not know the sword's true nature, she clearly intended to use Titania to plant a lethal trap within the Castline family. But she did not stop there. The first imperial consort offered a beautiful, yet equally venomous smile. "However, I cannot simply give you things for free. In return for this summer's sacrificial festival, in the far south of the empire, you shall go in place of Prince Brian, Titania, Her words sounded sweet, but it was in truth an absolute command. Titania saw right through the woman's scheme. The sacrificial festivals were held at the two most remote borders of the empire. The terrain was rugged. Demonic beasts lurked everywhere, and making the journey there and back would easily take an entire month. The consort could not bear to let her precious golden boy Brian suffer such hardships, especially while the seat of the crown prince remained unoccupied. Yet, if Brian did not go, his arch-nemesis, the second prince Adrian, would seize the chance to shine. Thus, she did not hesitate to dump this troublesome burden onto Titania, the low-ranking daughter of an insignificant concubine. What Cleo did not know, however, was that Titania was inwardly screaming with absolute joy. Yahoo! This is the perfect windfall. Titania rejoiced in secret. Did that woman have any idea how suffocating it was? To be a princess under house arrest? Forbidden from even stepping out of her own palace? This was a golden opportunity to legitimately step into the outside world. Though madly excited, Titania had to force herself to maintain a weak, fragile expression. Seeing this, Cleo launched a psychological attack, manipulating her further. Your fiancé is risking his life fighting demonic beasts to protect the empire. If you keep whining over such minor matters, young Duke Raymond will be terribly disappointed in you. Titania submissively nodded in agreement. Satisfied that her mission was accomplished, the consort departed triumphantly, not forgetting to throw in a minor benefit. I shall summon a priest to heal your wounds. Tidy yourself up. After all, that is the true virtue of a woman. Virtue, my foot. She really managed to piss me off right until the last second. Titania muttered in annoyance. Once she dismissed the servants, she collapsed onto her bed in exhaustion. But upon second thought, this was a golden opportunity. The only problem giving her a headache now was the winter festival in the north. Historically, the original purpose of the sacrificial festivals was to reinforce the seal of darkness. Long ago, the imperial family possessed the power of light, leading the heroic clans to slay demonic beasts. The ridiculous truth, however, was that over time, the imperial family had lost this divine power. To hide their incompetence, they turned the festival into a mere cosmetic ritual. While other clans slowly withered away, only the ducal house of Castline preserved their primordial power by maintaining their bloodline. Today, they were like a project manager whose entire team had abandoned them, left to single-handedly shoulder the burden of maintaining the seal and purging the demonic beasts. Thinking of how participating in the winter festival meant she would have to stay cooped up at the Castline estate for an entire week, Titania clutched her head in frustration. Just kill me instead. I want to go home. I miss my parents so much. A deep yearning for her real family from her past life washed over the young girl. Meanwhile, at the Castline estate, a tense interrogation was taking place. Duke Ordo tapped his fingers on the desk, his sharp gaze fixed directly on his son, Raymond. Why did you take it upon yourself to visit that abandoned mine before reporting to me? Is it because you feel guilty toward the princess, now that you realize she is not the useless person you once thought? Raymond paused slightly, his golden eyes flickering with an indescribable confusion as his hands instinctively clenched. I only made the best decision for the family. But he could not deceive his highly experienced father. Ordo recognized that his stiff, stoic son was genuinely shaken. Raymond was a child who had always forced himself to carry burdens far heavier than anyone else. He had never spared a glance for any of the ladies who tried to charm him, let alone his fiancée in name. Yet now, because of Princess Titania, he had acted so recklessly. The Duke sighed and made his decision. Very well, I shall give the girl a chance. Thank you, father, Raymond replied, his expression causing the Duke to widen his eyes in surprise. As darkness enveloped the study, Duke Ordo quietly opened a golden locket. Inside was a portrait of a woman. A faint, deep sorrow washed over the powerful man's face. He muttered the word responsibility, simply because he had to prop up an entire empire in place of the useless imperial family. He had once been forced to grit his teeth and abandon the woman he loved most. That pain was so immense that he had always hoped Raymond, his heir, would choose a safer path. He wanted his son to marry an ordinary person, someone who would not require him to sacrifice or endure anything more, and certainly he had hoped that person would absolutely not be a daughter of the imperial family, who were effectively their enemies. Yet, recalling his son's rare look of relief from earlier, Orto's gaze darkened. The Castline family never forgets a kindness, nor do we ever forget a grudge. What then should I do with the feelings beginning to sprout in our son's heart, my dear wife? As expected, Consort Cleo moved swiftly. At the break of dawn, she dispatched a priest to heal Titania, effectively locking in her promise to force her into the sacrificial festival. However, the first imperial consort was not the only one acting with speed. The Castline ducal family had also accepted the transaction. They immediately sent a guardian knight to the Rose Palace. Yet, of all people, why on earth did they send him? Standing before Titania now was the second young master, Lysianthus. While the eldest son, Raymond, was cold, and the third son, Lesper, was calm, the second son was a certified menace, known as the mad dog of the Castline family. He possessed a tyrannical temperament, entirely willing to burn down an entire banquet table if displeased. He respected only his elder brother, Raymond. Consequently, he naturally found Titania to be an absolute eyesore. In her past life, he had frequently used the most venomous words to insult her, while the young Titania of that time could only grit her teeth and endure it. But that was a thing of the past. Sorry, kid, but I've been reincarnated. These childish bullying tactics aren't going to work on me. Currently, the red-haired youth was holding a tree branch, repeatedly poking it near Titania's face to annoy her. Seeing that she paid him no mind, he frowned. Hey, are you deaf? Or are your ears completely clogged? Seeing her continue to freeze him out, he laughed in irritation. How long do you plan to ignore me? Suddenly, whoosh! A hot, bright red flame shot out from the branch, rushing right past Titania's face. She gasped in alarm. Are you insane? Playing with fire indoors? Lysianthus smirked. Oh, so you finally noticed me? Titania clenched her fists, keeping her patience. It's fine. My opponent is just an overgrown middle schooler. Think about the difference in our mental ages. Just think of this as karma for my past life. This is my second life now. I can keep my composure. But no sooner had she reassured herself than Lysianthus spoke up again. What's wrong? Don't like it? If you hate indoor fireplay that much, I can just burn this entire place down to turn it into the outdoors. Unable to take it anymore, sizzle, Titania calmly dumped her teacup directly onto the branch. The flame died instantly, emitting a thick plume of smoke. There should be a limit to your jokes. Poured water extinguishes fire. That is basic knowledge. Does the second young master not know this? Lysianthus's eyes widened, completely freezing in his tracks. This was a scenario he had never anticipated. How could a coward like her calmly douse his fire, and then turn around to mock his lack of common knowledge? Looking at him, she thought, yes, this lunatic really will set the Imperial Palace on fire in the distant future, after the life of his beloved younger sister was threatened. Because of her, his father and elder brother openly declared that there was no need to hold back anymore, and he truly did rampage through the Imperial Palace like a madman. If he could control such powerful flames at his current age, he must have awakened his powers long ago. The power of fire was divided into several stages. The weakest was red flame, the intermediate stage was white flame, and the final stage was blue flame. I recall hearing that once someone reaches the blue flame stage, only a power of equivalent magnitude can neutralize it. Why was such a terrifying power granted to a rascal like him? Titania began to question his purpose. The Duke sent you here to check if I've truly gone mad, didn't he? Or did he send you here to practice arson on the Imperial Palace? Flustered, Lysianthus scratched his head and snapped. What? Why would I burn down the palace? She chuckled. Oh my, didn't you just say something about burning this entire place to the ground? Realizing he could no longer intimidate the woman in front of him, Lysianthus huffed and pulled an envelope from his coat. Father told me to give you this. A letter sent by Duke Castline himself? As she opened the envelope, her pupils contracted sharply,